Hi, Charlie.
Hey, good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me back.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Welcome to Composer's Voice. So, why don't you tell us your name and a little about yourself?
I'm Charlie Rauh. I'm a composer, mostly a composer and a studio musician, and I recently, in the past couple of years, started venturing more and more into writing. First writing for a couple of articles for Acoustic Guitar magazine that sort of started giving way into a larger, more expanded version of the ideas I was talking about. With the way that I compose often is taking inspiration from literature and trying to sort of translate the intention of it into music. And that kind of gave into being approached by Adam Perlmutter, executive editor for Acoustic Guitar, to do a songbook. He wanted to know if I'd be interested in making a songbook of just the lullabies that I write, the solo guitar style, translated lullabies that often deal with literature. And that sort of started expanding again into the series of essays that I was writing, that I asked him, would you be, this is directly related. The essays are kind of talking about creative process and things like that. And it's mentions a lot of the music that was in the book. And then my sister, who's an illustrator and an artist, Christina Rauh Fishburne, I approached her and asked if she would be into illustrating it. So that's been my most recent project. It's called Simply, Patiently, Quietly. And it's basically a 3-part essay about creative approach and sort of being intentional and living into the intention of your creative process. That's a combination of a 3-part essay, illustrations, pen and ink illustrations by my sister, and then 30 pages of notated solo guitar music and choir music that I composed.
And tell me a little bit more about, how you work with literature and music.
So I started a few years ago just trying to come up with a way to continuously have inspiration to compose. And I started thinking of all the things I like to read, a lot of poetry and some short stories and some memoirs. And then I started trying out the idea of translating it, or the way I look at it is translating the poem or the written piece into music. So not as much reacting to it, but trying to move it into a new medium. So if the poem were a song, what would it sound like? So I worked with a few poems by writers like Phyllis Wheatley, Anne Bronte, Emily Bronte. So a lot of writers that I just enjoy reading, and what I try to do is translate them into a concise musical form, which is where I get a lot of inspiration from lullabies, because they're meant to be simple, they're meant to be remembered, and they're meant to be easily replicated. So I like the idea of the songbook element of this, because the music is not extremely technically difficult to play, and I like that accessibility aspect to it. So the whole point that I was going for, and that I continue to go for, is to translate intention in a way that's accessible to people, either listening or playing or just enjoying in any way that they like.
And so give us some examples of the lullaby sort of being translated.
So an example would be taking one of the songs played in this program was inspired by an Anne Bronte poem that I was really moved by. It's her talking about her vulnerability, basically, that she doesn't feel like she's living up to the person she's supposed to be, and sort of just spilling that insecurity. And I had this idea once when I was on tour, and I talk about this in the book as well, but I was on tour in the Portland, Oregon airport, and I was working on the music for The Bluebell, which is the album about Emily and Anne Bronte poems. That hadn't come out yet. I was still composing the music. And I really wanted to write something for that poem, and I finally had an idea. So I found a secluded corner and kind of sat down, took my guitar out, and was like, let me just record it so I don't forget.
Right.
So I recorded it, and then I listened back, and I was just completely disappointed, and I thought it really sucked. And I was like, this idea sounded really cool in my head, but this is just not good. It's not worthy of the poem. It's not translating the poem, right? And then I look up, and there's this little girl standing in front of me, and it kind of startled me because I didn't hear her walk over anything because I was so focused in trying to, get this idea down. And I look up and I kind of recoil, and she's just standing there and says, "I really like your song," and then runs away. So that, to me, was a really valuable lesson in this idea of translating something, translating intention into music, that the translation might be even more accurate if you think it's not. Because I had lost it, I had lost the goal. Instead of actually translating the intention of the poem, I was too involved. I was self-absorbed. I was like, oh, this isn't musically worthy. This isn't showcasing this. It isn't like, technically up to this. I was just thinking of myself. I wasn't thinking of the poem.
Right. This is a poem talking about not living up to
yeah. So it wound up being a pretty meta situation. But I the little girl made me realize, well, the idea I had was pretty accurate. It was servicing the poem, but I was getting in the way of the translation itself. Sure. So that was a really valuable lesson on actually trying to pay attention to what the written word is saying in these poems or these literary pieces. And the name of the lullaby, "Though Weak Yet Longing to Believe," is one of the lines from the poems. Right. And it was a really amazing experience and a good learning experience that the little girl taught me, that if you do want to accurately translate the intention of literature into music, you have to think more about what, it is your interpretation, obviously, but you have to think about what is the writer saying. That's way more important than what you're trying to showcase musically. And that's where my, distraction came from, that I wasn't thinking anymore about, is this an accurate translation? I was just thinking about myself. I was thinking about the guitar and are people going to think this is cool? And then this little girl brought me back to Anne's actual poem. She was like, no, it doesn't, that's not the important part. The important part is, what is Anne talking about? And if it were music, what would it sound like? And you did it. That idea of not just reading something and reacting emotionally, but actually trying to translate it, there's a real difference, because it's all based on intention. The intention of what the literature is saying, more so than yourself. Right. So it's a way of, what I enjoy about it is the challenge of trying to get outside of myself and make music about something that's larger than myself, that's not just expressing me, it's just I'm using myself to channel something else.
Well, it sounds great. Out of the mouth of babes, though.
Yeah.
Children tend to
tell it like it is.
Tell it like it is.
I mean, she just as easily could have come up and been like, yeah, that really sucked.
Well, they do that too.
And if she thought so, I'm sure she would have. Yeah. But so that was a really, really nice experience. And there's an element of the book in Simply Patiently Quietly where I talk about that experience and sort of elaborate on it a little bit more.
Cool. And what other pieces from the book are they?
So there's 30 pieces, and I deliberately wanted there to be at least one piece from everything that I've released so far.
Okay.
All the releases I've had. So there's 30 pieces covering a lot of ground. That one piece that I talk about in the book is from the Bluebell, and all of this music was released on Destiny Records, which is the label I've been on for the past 6 or 7 years now, I think. So the most recent project I have is called Theoria, and that's the entire album. It's the only one in the book where an entire album is present in the songbook. And that's because I had just finished it a few months before I started writing the essay, so it was very fresh in my mind. But that project was a commission, a composer residency, where I was invited to go to Louisiana State University to be composer in residence at the veterinary school, to work with the doctors and the animal patients to try to compose wellness-oriented music. And the way that came about was from this idea of translating intention. When I met Sandy Sarr at the Festival of Words, a literary conference in Louisiana years ago, I was doing a co-workshop with Cornelius Eady, where I talked about my process with the lullabies and translating, and he was giving the main workshop, and I was sort of like a peripheral part of it. And he was talking about his wonderful poetry and his approach and leading a writing workshop for people. But Sandy was there, and that's where we met. We started talking. At the time, I didn't know that she worked at LSU. So about 4 years later, it was, I think, that she contacted me in 2022. And she said, I don't know if you remember, we had this conversation about translating intention, the way that you create music trying to translate intention. Would you be interested in being a composer in residence at LSU VetMed, at the veterinary school and hospital? And I was like, yeah. I don't know exactly what that means or how I would do it, and because no one has before. As far as we know, there hasn't been a composer in residence at a veterinary school before. So I just said yes, and I was like, yeah, let's figure it out. And it wound up being this amazing experience that much of the book references. Because again, it was still so fresh and it had just happened, and all of the music is in the songbook portion, but a good portion of the second two essays of Patiently and Quietly refer back to this project, where I spent time with animals and doctors and just trying to absorb the atmosphere of that wellness, that pursuit of wellness. And the responses we saw from the animals while I was there is something else I talk about in the book, but it was pretty fascinating because it seemed, at least to me and to several of the doctors I worked with, it seemed that the music was creating a context that made wellness and sort of medical treatment make sense.
Right.
And that was the fun part to witness. I've mentioned a few examples in the book, but one of them that was really nice was an elderly dog that couldn't really hear too well was having osteopathy work done. So, having sort of like deep massages and pulling on muscles. And, they were kind of uncomfortable, but like didn't really know what was going on. And I was sitting on the other end of the room where they couldn't see me.
Okay.
And I started, playing some of the music, and I would only do this when the doctors invited me in, but I got called down to try this. They're like, do you want to try playing the music while we do this osteopathy session? And it was really nice because the dog was, at first we thought the dog couldn't even hear it, that I was just kind of there, and we were just seeing what would happen. And then in a break in the treatment, the dog got up, turned around, walked over, and while I was playing, put the top of her head against the guitar.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and so she could feel it. And not only could she feel the vibrations, but it was something that drew her closer. So that was a really interesting and sweet, example of seeing evidence that there is an effect of intention. It seemed like the intention was, reaching the patient.
Well, I love the idea. I think it's fantastic. I mean, it's just a very innovative idea.
Yeah. I think the main difference of it was that, and this is what I'm so grateful to Sandy Sarr for, is she specifically asked me to do this because of what we were talking about, because of trying to translate intention musically. That this wasn't just about bringing music into the hospital, which has happened before. This was about crafting specific music for a specific purpose.
Right.
Music that only exists to promote and encourage wellness on an interspecies level. Right. Which is very, specific. That's not to say people can listen to it in whatever context they want, but that's why it's created. That's its identity.
Right.
That music exists for one reason, and it was created for that. Right. Which doesn't mean it can't be enjoyed in other contexts, but that makes it different than, somebody bringing a string quartet into a hospital and playing beautiful, pieces by Beethoven or something.
Right.
Which is also amazing, and also has very much wellness-oriented properties. Right. And I'm a huge supporter of that. But
you're taking away that conversation, the sort of connection part of it.
Yeah, this is more about, this was created, for you. Yeah. Like looking at the animals and the doctors, this is your music.
And the other interesting thing about it is, the recipient doesn't have like a common language base.
No. Yeah.
Right. the language is the sound.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's what was interesting from the observations that seemed so contextual because it in place of language, the music was there. There was another situation that I wrote about in the book as well. There was a dog, I still remember her name, Reika. I think she was a Rottweiler or a larger dog. A dog that you don't want to mess with. But Reika was in the integrative medicine department, which is where I spent most of my time. That department is amazing. It's run by two women who are incredible doctors with dual doctorates in Eastern and Western medicine. So they use a combination of traditional Chinese medicine and Western techniques. And they were very into the idea of trying to see what would happen with the music. So one time there was Reika was coming in and they wanted to give her an acupuncture treatment, but if I remember right, Reika had joint problems, so was in extreme pain, very agitated, and again a large dog. You don't want to be around an agitated, massive dog. So they kept trying to give it a shot of B12, a muscle relaxer. And every time the needle would just get close, Reika would freak out. And so they called me up in the office and do you want to try playing the music? So I came down and they left the room and Reika was just kind of walking in circles. So I started playing some of the music and eventually Reika sat down, went down on one side and just knocked out, went to sleep. Yeah. And in the course of about 5 minutes. So I kept playing the music. The doctors came back in and they were able to wake the dog up and put 20 acupuncture needles in the dog without any resistance. So that was one of the other situations where, when I was talking to the doctors afterwards, there was something contextual about the music that clarified, even though the needle hurts, it's helping you. Because that seemed to be the breakdown that wasn't getting through.
Right.
She was not connecting it that people were trying to help her. All she was experiencing was more pain.
Right.
So it seemed that maybe music provided some kind of context and put her in a space where she knew that she was being helped.
Right.
Which, we had a lot of conversations with the doctors and spent a lot of time with the animals, and it started unraveling and becoming more and more obvious of what this needed to be, that it needed to be music of direct intention, and it's not enough to just kind of, let me go on YouTube and put on a gentle music playlist.
Right.
That's not going to do the same thing as music that's created specifically for this purpose.
Sure.
So that is the latest project that I've done, and one of the interesting things about it was I'm a solo guitar composer, but I was kind of put in this weird situation on top of making music for animals in a hospital, which was already strange and difficult and challenging and amazing. But they also asked me if I would compose choral music for the LSU a cappella choir, which I've never done before. So that was really difficult. They were very generous in working with me and feeling it out. But I wrote 4 choir pieces that are also in the songbook. So everything is guitar except these 4 pieces in theoria, which was a really amazing experience writing for a 4-part choir.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was cool.
So, and where do we get this wonderful essays? Because this is these things are in the essays in the lullaby.
Yeah. So the book, the book that has all of this, Simply, Patiently, Quietly. The first I think 20 or so pages is the 3-part essay. That's sort of split up in those 3 elements of Simply, Patiently, and Quietly. 3 different essays. And throughout that, my sister, Christina Rauh Fishburne's illustrations are sort of embedded within the text. And then it'll move into a middle section, which is all of Christina's artwork. And then the back end of it is 30 notated solo guitar pieces and pieces for choir. The whole thing in total, I think, is around 75 or 80 pages.
Okay.
And it's going to be big, like concert size.
Oh, great.
So I wanted the pictures to be big. I wanted it to look, again, like a children's book. Like the font is really big, the pictures are big, and it's also, you can put it on a music stand and read it. So it's going to be cool. Yeah. But
your website is?
Website is charlierauh.com. Charlie spelled IERAUH, all one word, .com. So I'll have that on the homepage when there is a link to order it. And all the music that's in the songbook can be found on my website as well, because it's all the music in this one is already released. So that's another thing that hopefully will be enjoyable for people about the songbook is if they see something and they want to hear it so they can play by ear and look at it. All of it's publicly available, and it'll also be notated and with tablature. So if you don't read music, you can still play along.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for wandering down here.
Always a pleasure, sir.
Man, it's great. Yeah, so again, thank you for coming down.
Oh, thank you. This is a real pleasure. Always. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, dude.